Hi, welcome to the Corner of Knit and Tea, episode 265. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy K on Ravelry, Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I have an Etsy shop called the Corner of Knit and Tea where I sell my handspun yarns. I got out of order, didn't I? It's my own intro. This episode and every episode show notes are posted at my blog, which is thecornerofknitandtea.com. And finally, we have a Ravelry group called the Corner of Knit and Tea. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, February 17th, and clearly I am a little bit discombobulated. I was thinking of all the great things to talk about today, and usually I can sort of tune out and do the introduction by memory, but sometimes I can't. So hi, how are you? I have had a good week and weekend. It's interesting because, and I will discuss this, I am sort of at a forced stopping point in a bunch of my projects because this week's dilemma is I have run out of yarn. So I will talk a little bit about that on the projects I'm allowed to talk about. And I will talk a little bit about what I have been doing. I have gotten a little bit of time to craft for myself, which has been kind of fun. And I don't know, I suppose that's about it. What have you been up to? Last Friday was Valentine's Day, and that will actually lead me into the start of the podcast. Wes and I don't usually make a big deal out of Valentine's Day. We do go to the same restaurant. We've been going to the same Thai restaurant for the last, let me think about it, 13 years. And so we went out for Thai food and it was lovely. And he was really funny because at the end of the day, he said, I ordered you something, but it didn't come. And we normally don't exchange gifts. We just exchange cards. But it turned out that what he had ordered me was a Sweet Treat Essentials, from David's Tea. And that was really, really sweet. It is 8, teas from David's Tea. And they kind of themed it as a Valentine's Day special. And then he said they sent him a message that they had so much demand that then they didn't have enough to ship out. So it's a nice little box with 8 different teas in it, and they all sound yummy. There are things like bergamot kisses, s'mores chai, hot chocolate, chocolate covered strawberry, and 4 others. And so it's just a little container that has about enough tea for 2, and for 2 servings of tea, although you can make multiple cups from loose leaf. But I am having the chocolate covered strawberry today, which has apple, hibiscus blossoms, white chocolate pieces, whole milk powder, cocoa beans, cocoa peels, natural flavoring, carrot, beetroot, raisins, roasted chicory root, yerba mate, strawberries, and stevia extract. So that is what I am drinking today, and I'm drinking that in my tentacular mug from Semi-Cool Ceramics. She does these great mugs with the tentacle handle. Her name is Julia. She is also a knitter, and she is from Sweden, I think, and she is absolutely lovely. So that is what I'm drinking today. Ooh, that is really good. Mostly I get the strawberry, kind of the bright berry flavor. It smells amazing. I always find strawberry teas really smell a lot like strawberry. They taste kind of more berry-ish, but strawberry is not fresh strawberry is not a hugely strong taste in a tea, or at least not in a lot of the teas that I have drunk. So that is delicious. So let's talk about the knits and what I have been doing. I do have a finished knit because I had a little bit of free time this week, and so I cranked out the second sock of my Christmas socks so that those are now done. Now I will tell you, I screwed up a little bit on the second sock. It is both taller and a bit longer than the first sock, as you can see if I put them right next to, I think you can hear. Let me put the first sock on there. You can see one's taller and it's a little bit longer, and I don't care, they're done. And they will be ready to wear next Christmas. So, this is Stranded Dye Works, who is Amy. It was her BFL nylon base, which was, I believe, a 90-10 base in her Christmas colorway for this year called Gingerbread House, spelled Haus. And she also sold it, if you wanted it, with a complimentary complimentary, not free, but color coordinating mini in the red. So I am glad these are done. Usually I try and finish my Christmas socks in January because these were my Christmas Eve cast on. So I should say I didn't cast them on until Christmas Eve, but usually I try and finish them in January, and this year I just did not for whatever reason. So those are done. I used about half the skein, so I have enough left that maybe one of the children is going to get a pair of socks, and I'm thinking maybe Miles, because his favorite color these days is red, and so I was thinking maybe I'll make him a pair of socks with the leftovers. So I didn't do toes because I wasn't sure if I'd have enough. I definitely have enough, so I can probably do cuffs and heels and maybe even toes for Miles socks. So I will get back to those a little bit later in the year, but I love them and they're great, and this is possibly my lone project for Finish It February. So these were on the needles before the start of the month, and I wanted to be sure that they got done. So next up is my Drifter Shawl by Tammy Gore, knit in Zen Yarn Garden. I am knitting it in her Arabian Nights colorway, both the one of a kind and the splatter, and that again is from Zen Yarn Garden. I do a lot of sample knitting for them, and this is a beautiful project, and I am stumped because I have almost run out of yarn. So this is a triangular shawl, and it can be worked in 2 or 3 colors. I have knit one once before. I knit one in Bijou Basin yarns earlier this past year. They are closed now, or I shouldn't say earlier this past year, I should say in 2019, and they unfortunately are closed now. But I knit a beautiful shawl that I gave to my mom for Mother's Day, and this is Tammy's shawl, and it can be knit in 2 or 3 colors. Now the pattern calls for between 740 and 800 yards, and I had 800 yards of super squishy, super fine merino. It's 100% Italian merino from Zen Yarn Garden, and I actually ran out of yarn. I do not have enough yarn to complete the project. I believe I am getting roughly on gauge, and I am knitting it on a size 6 needle. And when I went back, when I was pretty sure I was going to run out of yarn, I went back and looked at the pattern, and it would appear that a lot of people have run out of yarn when knitting this pattern, or have required closer to 850 or 900 yards when knitting it. So last time around I only required 770 yards. However, my yarn was a camel yak, and so it was super drapey and did not have a lot of squish to it, and so I'm wondering if that is the difference this time. It also could be subtle differences in my gauge. I just don't know. So it's a little bit of a conundrum because now I have to find out what the dyer would like me to do. So I'm just sort of on hold on this project. I used up as much as I could of the darker colorway, which is kind of the variegated with the brown, and that's not even enough left to do a single row, and I've got this much left of the white, but the feature of these shawls, and I will tell you because this is the second time I've gotten into trouble with this, the feature of these shawls, and I hope I'm not giving too much away, it is a paid for pattern and I will not tell you the numbers or how to do it, but the feature of shawls of this shape, like Find Your Fade and this particular one, are that they grow around a center spine, and then at some point you start decreasing your stitches on one side of the spine and increasing the stitches on the other side of the spine. And the deal is that you eventually decrease out all of these stitches on the short side of the spine, and so you end up with one straight line when you're done, rather than right now it's not a right angle, but it's sort of an angle. And so the problem is that when you run out of yarn on a shawl like this, you can certainly bind it off, but it doesn't ever kind of resolve into a straight line. Now, the reason I talk about this is because when I did the Find Your Fade, You may remember that, those of you who were around may remember that I did not pay attention when I was in the increasing phase. And at some point in the increasing phase, where you're increasing on both sides, they tell you to stop, because what you are going to do is then you're going to keep the same number of stitches, but you're going to be sort of transferring them over. And again, I'm not going to explain how to do that because that's part of the reason to buy the pattern. But so when I was doing my Find Your Fade, I increased too many stitches, which meant that I had extra rows when I was trying to decrease out the stitches at the end, more than I should have had, and it required me to get an extra skein of yarn to actually finish the project. And it's also, like I said, why I can't just bind off right now, or I could, but I sort of have to wait and see if that's what the dyer wants me to do. So, this one is a beautiful pattern. I love it. It is an easy pattern to knit, and I love the interplay, the way she uses the colors together with textured stitches to create some variation. I think it's a really smart knit, and it's a really fun knit, and so I would definitely recommend it. However, my recommendation is that if you knit this pattern, that you make sure you have a potential plan if you run short on yarn, or you try and knit it in some larger than 400 yard skeins. Both my skeins were 400 yards, and I did weigh, so I'm pretty sure that they were 400 yards to start. So yeah. And look at other people's project notes. Like I said, a lot of people have finished this in about 850 or 900 yards, which doesn't work if you have two 400 yard skeins. So I am super happy with this knit. I'm hoping I'm not going to have to rip it. I'm hoping we'll just come up with a solution for it. And I did, the only modification I made in this section is that I ran out of the darker one early, so I stopped early. And actually, one of my suggestions, and I'm just waiting to see what they'll want to do, is that if I had another half skein of the dark color, I could actually rip back to here and then do the dark sections the full length that they are supposed to be, and then I should have enough yarn to finish. So, but that would be another probably 200 yard skein, and I'm sure I would not use all of it. I just know that I don't need like another full 400 yard skein to finish. So then it would be about a 2.5 skein knit. This pattern also does come in a 3 color. Both are in the same, both renditions are in the same pattern. And so you can either follow the instructions for the 3 color, or you can follow the instructions for the 2 color. And my guess is that if you started with 3 skeins, you would definitely have enough, because then you'd have 3 skeins worth of yarn. So that is where I'm at on this. You will see this. I had hoped to finish it this weekend, but you will see this at least once more, because I will need to do something to finish it. So that is that one. In progress, and not everything always works out perfectly for me, so I thought I would share that one with you. So, because the theme this week is running short on yarn, the other sample that I am knitting, which I cannot show you, I also ran out of yarn on that one. So, and that one, I did not choose this, I did not suggest the pattern, they sent me a box of yarn and a pattern, and I ran out. So I have sent them notes about that, and I should be receiving more yarn in the mail, but that may take up to a week. So I had some free time, so I went ahead and cast on for something that I was just itching to cast on for, but was not letting myself because I had too much work to do. So I cast on for a cowl with those beautiful yarns that I showed you last week, which is the Joseph and Annie DK, which will be going on sale on Saturday, February 29th at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you check the Abundant Earth Fiber Instagram stream, you will see more details about that. And this is the yarn label. It's called J&A, stands for Joseph and Annie in DK. And the colorway is Pepper, which means it is white, and it's got just little bits of a darker color in. It reads very gray. And it's a natural yarn. It is organic merino from various places in the United States. So, and they mill that in Whidbey Island at Abundant Earth Fiber Mill. The other thing they sent me was a mill end, which is not a full skein, but it is a skein of Metamorphic by Spin Cycle Yarns, and they sent it to me because they actually spin that yarn up in their mill. And this yarn is really cool. It is a combination of bits of leftover fibers, waste fibers from spinning the other spin cycle yarns, and then it is combined with a dark wool, 50% new wool, to make this kind of recycled yarn. And I envisioned the two together in a project because I really liked the way they looked. In general, I'm not so much of a natural fibers person. Like, you know me, I usually work with color, in part because I don't think that the natural colors really work with my skin tone super well. But this is absolutely amazingly squishy and lovely, and I just really wanted to use them together. And so I picked out a pattern. It is called the Rose Garden Cowl by Darling J'adore, and that's Darling J apostrophe Adore. It's French, means darling I adore you, or J'adore means I adore you, I love you. And it is this fun cowl with a whole bunch of texture. And this is what I have so far, and I am loving knitting this. Basically, I'm using this as a I shouldn't say it this way, but a carrot and a stick approach. So when I have sample knits going on and I need to meet goals on those, what I do is I set a goal for myself and I work on the sample knit until I achieve that goal. And then sometimes I let myself work on something for myself, just a little something fun. And that's not because I don't enjoy sample knitting, I really do. But I also like knitting for myself and knitting with new yarns that I've gotten. So this weekend I cast on for this cowl. And this cowl makes use of some interesting techniques. Texture is really, really big lately. I don't know if you've noticed, but there seem to be bobbles on everything lately. And the interesting thing is that I don't really consider myself a fan of bobbles, but when I saw this cowl, posted on the pattern posted on Ravelry, I was like, oh, I really want to knit that. And the photo on Ravelry, she uses a neutral colored yarn in the background, and then she uses something that has some color changes for the the textured section. And I had thought, oh, you know what I really, really want to do? I want to get a neutral for the background, and then I want to use some of my hand spun to add the texture to it, because I thought that would be really cool. Well, when I saw these two yarns together, I decided that this is what I wanted to make with them. And so this is a paid for pattern on Ravelry, but it is a pretty simple pattern. It's a 6-row repeat, and it shows you how to make these little nubs of texture. So interestingly enough, I had to write a piece this week, a tutorial piece. I ghostwrite for a lot of websites as part of my job. And one of the things that I had to write about this week was talking about adding texture to your knits and how that has become a new hot trend. And one of the things I discussed was the difference between Nups and Bobbles. Now, both add texture to your knit, and both are created in somewhat similar ways. However, they are a little bit different, and I thought I would show you some of my samples to show you a little bit how they are different. So technically in this pattern, this is a nup technique rather than a bobble technique, although I see a lot of people refer to them as interchangeably. So I believe what the difference is nups are created, nups and bobbles are both created by adding multiple new stitches into a single stitch, and then resolving those stitches back into a single stitch. So, for instance, what I have knit here is, this is a 3-stitch nup. So when I go into my stitch, I do a knit 1, yarn over, knit 1 into the same stitch. So I have created 3 loops on my stitch. Then I continue on in pattern, and on the next row, when I come back around and it's in the round, and in this case, technically, in this case, technically, what I do on the next row is I purl those 3 stitches together. So, and traditionally, the way nups are done, it's a lot of explanation. Nups, the word nup, which is N-U-P-P, It is actually an Estonian term, and it hails from Estonian knitting. And they are called nups because in Estonian, nup is the word for bud, like a bud on a branch. And the technique of creating nups creates little buds in your knitting. So to create these nups, nups can be created out of any number of loops. Usually it's an odd number because, like I said, what you would do is you would knit, yarn over, knit into the stitch, or knit, yarn over, knit, or however many. These are actually 7 stitch nups, where I went into the stitch 7 times. And then I continued my work all the way to the end of the row, and then this one was worked back and forth. So when I flipped it over, then what I did is I purled the 7 loops together all into one stitch. So on one row, I add basically 6 stitches in 6 extra stitches because I knit 7 stitches in one. And then on the next row, I resolve it and I go back to my regular stitch count by knitting them all together. So nups they do add texture to your work, but they sort of sit flush in line with your work because it is just one set of extra loops you have created. And like I said, it resolves in a single row. Contrast that to a traditional bobble. Now, a bobble is created in somewhat the same way, which is you are going to knit yarn over, or you're going to knit front and back into a stitch to add extra stitches. However, the difference that I found with bobbles is that in bobbles, you often work those extra stitches a few rows extra. So you get something that looks a little bit more like this. Now, what I did is I knit up to the stitch in the knitting, and then these are 7 stitch bobbles because I wanted to contrast them to my 7 stitch nups, just for comparison, apples to apples, oranges to oranges. So what I did was I knit up to the stitch where I wanted to add my bobble, and then this one I actually knit front and back. So I knit front, back, front, back, front, back, front until I had 7 stitches. Then what I did is I worked those 7 stitches and those 7 stitches only back and forth a few times. So I added them by knitting, so then I purled back and then knit back and then purled back. And then on the following row, I knit all 7 loops together back into one stitch. So the bobble itself creates this almost button that sits on top of the knitting because you're actually creating extra fabric in there. And as you can see, it kind of pushes out, it adds a bunch of extra texture. And so these are really big. Not everyone does 7 stitch bobbles. You can do 3 stitch bobbles, you can do 5, you can do 7, you can do 9, odd numbers usually. And so that is kind of the difference between nups and bobbles. So that said, even though this is referred to as a bobble stitch in the pattern, I believe it is actually a nup. And so that is how I am knitting this one. I'm adding the stitches on one row and then resolving them on the next row. So that is what I'm working on. I hope to work on this a little more this week because I'll have some free time while I wait to find out how to deal with some of the other things going on. I might be able to finish this month. I hope so. I think I might not have enough of this yarn to make it as tall as I want it to. The skeins are 230 yards, and I think I might like it to be a really tall, big, oversized cowl, in which case I will have to wait until this becomes available for sale and pick up another skein at the end of the month. And if that is the case, then this one will not be finished this month, but I am looking forward to it. It is super soft and squishy. The merino is beautifully soft, and I think it's going to be great next to my neck, and I am so excited about this. And I have to tell you, so I did not think I was a bobble or nup person, and now I kind of feel like I am. And now, I don't know if you've seen it, but Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, she came out with a new sweater, and I think it's called Faded Nev, and it is a fade, but it's mostly a sweater knit with some rows of bobbles or nups. To be honest, I haven't bought the pattern, so I haven't figured it out. But now I'm kind of all over this texture, and now I think maybe I need a neutral sweater quantity and then to use my hand spun for the bobble details on a sweater. I'm on the Bobble train. That's going to be the title of this episode. Apparently, I am on the Bobble train. Although, again, these are Nups, but I'm on the Bobble train. So, yeah. So, that is what I have been working on this week. I have a few other patterns that I am working on and will be able to share with you shortly. I'm just not done with them yet, and so I'm not ready to share. So, and then I went back and I pulled it out because I've been yelling that I am going to work on this, and it is finished at February, and I don't know if I'm going to finish it, but I went and got my boxy. And this is a pattern by Joji Locatelli. I am knitting it in beautiful woolly Wonka fiber in, I believe this is mulberry. In a singles yarn, and it is soft and squishy, and I would love to wear it before the winter is over, although I think actually as a fingering weight sweater it will be fine for the spring as well. But my plan is to work on this, get some rows in on this when I run out of things to knit and have some time to kill. So that is my plan for this week. And I hope that you have lovely crafting plans as well. I just finished all the yarn for the sheep, so I am done with, for the chickens, so I am done spinning my gray and white. I don't know if I will return to my spinning wheel this week and do a spin for myself or not. I just kind of have to see how things play out. So I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. If you are a returning viewer, thanks for coming back and sticking with me. If you are a new viewer, I hope you enjoyed and will come back in the future. I always have lots of projects and interesting things to talk about, or at least I hope they're interesting things. And I hope that you have a lovely week ahead. So until I talk to you again, I will say happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.